I'm Caden Love.
And I'm Seema Love, his wife.
And we are Love and Lore, taking dark fantasy, light fantasy, and everything in between. These genres encompass so many things: characters, world building, plot, but one of the greatest things in the fantasy genre that we love to talk about is magic and the magic systems. Notably, putting magic into my books is something that really gave me a drive to give them the story. That being why I chose to do an organ transplant magic system with such rigorous rules and things that go along with it. If you haven't read Elegy, you can check it out to see more of what that means. But noting this, we have to look at all of the great details that go into making a magic system. There are books that do this so well, and most notably Brandon Sanderson. Each one of his books has such a great magic system, and we'll touch on a couple of those as we list some of our favorites. But then we can look at some, like, even though we love Harry Potter, there are so many flaws there. What are the rules? Do you need to say words? Do you need a wand? We don't even know. There isn't much of a structure there.
And speaking of Harry Potter, I have such a problem with magic inconsistencies, specifically in the movies. I'm not sure if these inconsistencies happen specifically in the books, but in the movies, like, they say Expelliarmus, which is basically disarmament, and then their spell hits the person and he, like, flies away as if he was hit with something else. Expelliarmus is not supposed to do that. Like, I don't know.
And we love Harry Potter, and we do a yearly marathon where we watch all these movies. I think we've both read the series once, so maybe we could go back and retouch on that. But you look at, like, the Polyjuice Potion. In half of the movies, it leaves the character with their same voice. In other ones, it changes it, like with Mad Eye Moody. It's just, there are so many random problems there. And like I said, do wands even do anything? There are certain times where they just flick their wand and it does a spell, other times where they say a spell. It seems like magic in Harry Potter is just whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let's talk about some of the greater things in magic systems where we have rules that make a little more sense, and we're going to talk about them from some of our favorite books. Before we get into any big surprises or ones you might not have heard of, I did mention Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is so notable, especially for his world building and magic systems. My favorite, dear to my heart, is probably Allomancy. Mistborn was the first epic fantasy book from Sanderson that I got into, and I think that the rules plotted out in there that people ingest metals and can do all of these abilities is so cool, especially as we learn more about the combinations that come with them in the later books, including Era 2. But most people that have read Sanderson are familiar with these, same with those in the Stormlight Archive, but one of the ones that aren't touched on as much are the two individual systems in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. This was one of my favorite standalones from his. Like, you can read this without reading any of his other stuff, but having people combat these nightmare monsters by drawing pictures, I thought was just so cool. And then you have it on the flip, where we have Yumi, who stacks rocks, and that does magic. These were just so unique, and while we didn't get the big depth of exploration that you get in Sanderson's other books, because this is a smaller one and, like I said, a standalone, I thought these were very bold and really enjoyable and unique, unlike wands or just casting spells.
And while we're still talking about Brandon Sanderson, two of my favorite magic systems are also in his Cosmere world. And first one that I want to mention is Warbreaker, because not only is it my favorite Brandon Sanderson book, but it also has one of the most appealing magic systems to me as an artist. I've been always, as an artist, fascinated how light works and how color works, and how there are colors that we don't see, and how actually objects physically don't have colors, but the colors is just the way they refract light and reflect it. I've just always been fascinated with how it all works. So seeing a magic system based on that was really fun. And then another, also kind of artistic related magic system is Emperor's Soul, and if I remember correctly, they use stamps rather than drawings that literally rewrite the past of objects to make them into something else. And I thought it was just so cool. I assume it's kind of calligraphy inspired, and again, I love all the visual arts and I love the art of calligraphy, and I thought it was a really poetic magic system. I don't choose my magic system based on like how complex and well thought they are. It's more of like a vibe. I just love the vibes of certain magic systems.
And I think that that is one of the greatest things about Sanderson is he has so many different ones to offer, and people that really like getting into the writing craft side of it, he has clear rules set out for most of these. He has a cost associated. These aren't completely unlimited power. It's not magic that can just dominate worlds, and when it is, you know more so why. And there is just so much to explore there, especially how investiture, for those really experienced in the Cosmere, works into these and how some of them interconnect in the greater Cosmere world. And like I said, I do love the clear-cut rules here, but there are some like Malazan. Malazan is renowned for being one of the, if not the most complex epic fantasy series, and just as well as that, the magic in it is very complex. That being the warrens, the houses, the holds. There is so much to it. For those that don't know how the Malazan magic system works, we have these different warrens that are like individual worlds that the characters can go into, that they also use the power from, and these are often tied to certain races in the world, and there is so much to explore there. While this one is very frustrating in the beginning because you just have a lot of terms thrown out, this is one that you begin to understand gradually as the series progresses, as you do the characters and the world itself. But I just love the warrens tied to characters like Anomander Rake, who uses his sword, which might be the coolest weapon in all of fantasy, to bring characters into this warren, into this magical realm where he imprisons the souls. And I can't even get into all that. I'm no Malazan scholar by any means, but there is so much depth there. And like I said, it's good to have Sanderson where you can feel nice and comfortable, but if you're looking for something where you're always learning more and the rules don't seem as clear-cut, warrens in the Malazan series are truly something spectacular.
Moving on to next of my favorite magic systems. Like I said, I choose them for vibes, and I really like the vibes of the magic system in Caravel series. In that specific series, and I'm not sure how the magic works in the other series in the same world, because I know that there are other books written in the same world by the same author, but in this series, magic technically only exists in this traveling magical circus. And we later find out that there are some other magic sources from, like, for example, this like magical set of cards, but like the whole magic is like very thematic. And because it's kind of themed with like this traveling circus slash performance group, it has a really interesting character. It tricks you, and the whole book you're reading and like things happen and you're like, oh, but then you find out, oh, it was a trick. It actually didn't happen this way, or things are always not what you thought they were. I thought it was really fun to read.
And going along with just something that I loved for the idea of what it was, even though I haven't read any other books by R.F. Kuang, I thought Babel was so well done. The book itself honestly wasn't my favorite, even though that might be an unpopular opinion, but I respect what Kuang put into this book. This book is very well thought out, and the magic system initially comes from translation. There are certain objects that rely on translation of words to bring about the magic, and it's something you just have to understand by reading it. But noting that so many magic systems revolve around spells or spoken words, I loved the idea of translation from languages going into another language, causing magic was such a cool concept. And this book, if you haven't read it, is filled with footnotes. It is just so smartly done that even though it wasn't my favorite plot and story-wise, I had a great time reading it.
Okay, my last one I wanted to mention. I'm not as well read as Cadence, so I didn't have as many to mention. So I'll only do 4 today. But the last one I want to mention was The Sorcery of Thorns. It was not my favorite book, like plot-wise, and I can't say that the magic system itself is very unique and interesting, but there was just one aspect of it that I thought was so cool and so interesting, and it is the fact that when spells are written down on paper, and usually it's in books, they give life to the book. So literally, if you write down a symbol or a spell, it affects the object that is written on, and I just thought it was so fun. Such a fun idea.
One of my favorite recent ones is from the book An Exile of Water and Gold, which is the part of the greater series The Song of the Sleepers by Joshua Walker. This magic system relies on two things. The first being luminosity, which is the name of the magic in there. Think bioluminescence associated with plants, trees, things like that. And sleeping. We have certain characters that generate this by sleeping, and it then gives power to the whole civilization. Just the way of charging that and connecting it to nature was so great. If you haven't checked out the series, highly recommend it, where we see this race of people called the Aobians that live in these giant trees, and they are powered by this luminosity. This is how the society functions, whereas a lot of these we just see characters fighting and living with that magic. This is almost like a society is powered by the magic generated by their leaders through sleeping. Noting that An Exile of Water and Gold is an indie fantasy book, I highly, highly recommend checking it out. And those that have read indie fantasy are probably familiar with Will White's Cradle series. This one is perfect for fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and has one of the greatest magic systems I've ever read. It is so thorough, and honestly, a lot of it is just talking about the rules and how our main character, Wei Shi Linden, grows and progresses in his own magic path. This one isn't as focused as a lot of Sanderson's, meaning that there are so many different paths these characters can go. Linden actually has two paths that he goes on, one of them being this thing called the Path of the Black Flame, which is powered by flames and dragons, and that is just touching on the base of it. This series focuses a lot on characters' progression, noting that it is called a progression fantasy. We get to see how these characters grow and strengthen their magic and learn more to become great warriors. I really enjoyed this series, and it's one of those that you just need to experience to see the great expanse that is magic in that world, and it is definitely worth your time.
So yeah, these are our favorite magic systems. If you have any other cool ones in your mind that we haven't mentioned, please mention them in the comments, and thank you for watching.